From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Don Shipman. Cities and towns across the country are working to keep their residents safe and communities vital during the COVID-19 crisis. From supporting families and businesses facing economic hardships to providing health care, local governments are facing dilemmas that are draining their resources, and the situation in Holyoke is no different. So joining me here to discuss the proactive efforts his city is making in the face of this crisis is Holyoke Mayor Alex Morse. Thanks for coming on the program.
Great, thank you so much for having me.
And I want to talk about everything in the city, but I want to specifically talk about right now, before we get started, I want to talk about the situation at the Soldiers' Home there. They're now being investigated not only by the state, but also by the U.S. Department of Justice. That facility is run by the state, and so the city is dependent on them to report any issues there. So when were you and your city health officials first made aware of the growing COVID-19 crisis there?
Yeah, I mean, first I would just want to acknowledge how painful this has been for our city and our entire Commonwealth. Our veterans at the Soldiers' Home, frankly, deserve much better. And I think a lack of preparation and coordination started at the top, at the White House, and trickled on down to states and local communities. And I'm glad to see that the governor, the attorney general have both commenced investigations. We now have the federal government doing their own investigation. We were told that there was one initial case of coronavirus at the Soldiers' Home on around March 11th. We found out the Friday before the state intervened that one initial case had turned into 11 cases. And it was over that weekend that I was contacted by employees, an anonymous employee to my email account that was reading messages online. People were talking about horrendous conditions there, that the virus was spreading and there was an outbreak. And when we had attempted to reach out to the facility over that weekend, we got no response. And so it was that Sunday that I reached out directly to the former superintendent, Walsh, and had a direct conversation. And that's when I was first informed that at that point, 8 veterans had passed away at the facility without any knowledge given to our local Board of Health. And so that was when I reached out to the Lieutenant Governor and the Baker administration and made it very clear that it's important for them to know what's happening at the facility, that there clearly is an outbreak, and we need to make sure we respond to it to save as many lives as possible.
The Holyoke Medical Center has taken on a role in assisting the Soldiers' Home. What is the hospital's involvement, and do you have any updated information on what's going on there specifically?
Yeah, so I know, the state took quick action. The National Guard went in, they tested all residents there, they tested all employees at the facility. They're still recruiting to have more employees. Obviously, dozens of employees have also contracted the virus, which is a challenge. I think initially with the first case, they didn't follow proper quarantining protocol, and so that's what led to the outbreak in the facility. And so what we've seen now is wanting to make sure that those that have tested negative are safely isolated from those that test positive, and vice versa. And so I want to thank the Holyoke Medical Center for making space for over 40 residents of the Soldiers' Home that tested negative to make sure that they get the best health care as possible to keep them healthy and alive. And so the medical center has been stepping up time and time again. They've also went out of their way to donate PPE to a number of cities and towns, first responders, including the city of Springfield, Action Ambulance that works with the city of Holyoke. And so just want to thank the entire team at Holyoke Medical Center, not just the administration, but first and foremost, those nurses, doctors, CNAs, everybody on the front lines that are literally sacrificing, their health to make sure that our community stays healthy.
So what are the management of nursing facilities in Holyoke reporting to city health officials?
Yeah, this has been a challenge throughout the state. And so following the outbreak at the Soldiers' Home, our Board of Health reached out to state nursing homes throughout the city. And so we set up an email account pretty early on in this crisis, coronaresponse@holyoke.org. Still encourage the people of Holyoke, businesses, residents to reach out if you have questions or concerns. We've been getting inundated with requests and questions from people all over the city and all over Western Mass, quite frankly. And we've reached out to all nursing homes. Number one, can we help? Do you need PPE? Can we help with a local supply chain? We're working with local manufacturers on a number of things, from sanitizer to face shields. Do you need help with MEMA, with the state or federal government? We unfortunately feel like in many ways as a mayor or local government, we feel like we're on our own most days. And we've had to do a lot of this work on our own, making sure that our emergency operations center is set up, that we're thinking about all the right things to keep people safe. But we're taking leads from employees that are reaching out. Some nursing homes have reached out on their own. We are trying to figure out, can we send the National Guard to as many facilities as possible to do mass testing of employees and residents so that people know the depth of the crisis and the outbreak at these respective places.
All right, and I know that Mary Lou Sutters, the Secretary of the Health and Human Services, that already has mentioned, I mean, this has been mentioned, I think, at every one of the governor's news briefings about COVID-19. They've mentioned the Soldiers' Home specifically, and she's been mentioning, too, that the National Guard has been at the Soldiers' Home assisting with testing and providing testing kits to everyone. But as far as you mentioned the state and kind of on your own as a city, has the state contacted you about efforts to help with testing and medical support personnel?
To some extent, MEMA has, we have a daily call with MEMA in our emergency operations center. And so to some extent, they've provided PPE to local first responders and health officials, occasional deliveries. I think there's still some lack of coordination and communication between state and local governments. We have a weekly Massachusetts mayors and town and city managers call where we talk about what are some cities doing in terms of guidelines or curfews, certain policies that cities and other mayors are issuing, and can we replicate that? What we found is it's crucial that the governor, the leadership come from the top, and we don't have a piecemeal system where some cities are doing this and other cities aren't. In order to be as effective as possible, we need to be in unison here. So, I am grateful to the administration for partnership to some extent. Over the last few weeks, we did feel like we were making decisions on business closures earlier on, cancellations, social distancing, schools. And so I think, if anything, this crisis has shown from the national government on down that local government and mayors are really important right now to get information out to your residents and your constituents.
All right, we're going to continue our conversation here with Holyoke Mayor Alex Morse right after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. We're back here now, 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on the city of Holyoke with Holyoke Mayor Alex Morse. So thanks for joining us once again here. Everyone's daily life has been disrupted by this. It's an inconvenience, obviously. For others, it can be an extreme hardship. So Holyoke has thousands of students who are now having to learn from home. So how is the school department there responding to all of this?
Yeah, this is a challenge for families and parents all across Western Mass, all across the country, really. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing here in Holyoke. We realized early on that it's in times like these that we oftentimes see the divides and inequities in our community. And in Holyoke, we had thousands of students that just don't have access to devices or laptops at home, or even have access to internet. And so we have this expectation that our students will learn remotely without having the basic amenities necessary to fully participate and immerse themselves in that learning. So in partnership with our public schools, we distributed about 1,500 laptops to students of our school system a few weeks ago. And then just a few days ago, we were able to announce a partnership with Comcast where the city and the school department would provide 6 months of free internet access to any Holyoke Public Schools family that didn't have internet access at home. And so the digital divide is certainly something that exists here in the city, and I'm sure in other places across Western Mass. And I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to make that happen. And we launched a new website with the Holyoke Public Schools as well that has particular curriculum and information to guide learning at home, to guide parents and family members as to how to interact with your child. To do that, I really want to thank the educators, our teachers, our staff, everyone with the Holyoke Public Schools that are doing everything they can to make sure we can maintain some semblance of normalcy for our kids. I know teachers are missing our students are missing our teachers, they're missing that schedule, and just want to thank everyone for doing the best they can in what are really difficult circumstances.
And I know we've done a number of stories too on Holyoke and the graduation rate there. You guys have been working to get that up. So what are some of the options that the students have for distance learning? You mentioned those laptops.
Yeah, so we have a lot of good things happening in the Holyoke Public Schools. New programs. I mean, over the last several years, our graduation rate, as you mentioned before covering that, 8 years ago, only 49% of our kids were graduating from high school, and today nearly 73% of our kids are graduating from high school. And we have to make sure that we continue to make those investments in public education. And so, yeah, the laptop availability, internet, the launching of a site to guide learning, and teachers are going above and beyond to personally call students and parents to guide them while they're at home. But also just want to encourage folks to not stress out or overdo it. Life as we know it right now is turned upside down, and we can't put too many expectations on ourselves and on our kids. And I've been really heartened to see so many home activities that are bringing out the creative juices that so many of our young people have in this city. We launched a Holyoke at Home challenge a couple of weeks ago to, number one, encourage people to continue staying home in isolation, but also to support Holyoke businesses at the same time. And so we asked the people of Holyoke to make videos. What are you doing that's fun at home with your family? Submit them, and just a couple of days ago, we announced 3 winners. Each winner will get a $100 gift card to a Holyoke business of their choice. And we're going to launch the second phase of that next week with a talent show theme, asking the people of Holyoke, what are your talents? Can you sing? Can you dance? And submit your videos, and then we'll give the winners another $100 gift card to a Holyoke business of their choice.
And I hope that you're posting those videos as well, because we want to see these.
HolyokeAtHome.com. Yeah, check it out.
Perfect. So any resources have any resources been made available for special needs students?
Yes, so we have gotten additional guidance from the State Department of Education on this question in particular. And our teachers are working very hard on individual education plans, IEPs for students to strengthen them and to provide reimbursement for other resources that families need to invest in at home. And so, again, in these times, we need to make sure that our most vulnerable, oftentimes forgotten students and families are given everything they need to make sure that we support their learning and development while they're home.
And then you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what guidance are you getting from the state's Department of Education? Anything specific?
Well, initially it was odd because individual cities and towns were closing schools on their own for 2 weeks at a time. We did that here in Holyoke, and then the governor and the commissioner made the decision to close schools throughout the state. Like I said before, it really needs to come from the top here in the state, guidance around school closures. We were told the date of May 4th as a return. Obviously, I think that's still in flux, and we don't have enough information to make a determination there, and we'll await guidance from the state. I was happy to see that the MCAS was canceled for this spring, and I think that was a good decision to take a lot of pressure off our students and off our teachers. And I think too often we're teaching kids and requiring teachers to teach to the test, not to teach to the whole child. And I think it was certainly a good decision to call off the MCAS this year. It's something that we should consider moving forward.
And I noticed, too, that a lot of universities aren't requiring, at least for the next year or so, SATs and stuff like that. What about opening schools back up? I guess specifically, is that now a state decision, or is that on the local level?
At this point, I want to say it's a state decision. So there is a weekly call of all superintendents with the Commissioner of Education, Jeff Riley. And those questions continue to come up. I think all of us need to just step back a bit, and this assumption that everything's going to go back to normal with the switch of it's not as easy as just putting on a light switch. It's going to be much more like a dial and a thermometer where we have to slowly turn back on the economy and a normal way of life. And I think the new normal will be much different than what we were used to before this pandemic. And so whether it's schools, our economy, big events, everything's going to look different for a while, especially up until the point that we have a vaccine that is free and available to every American in our country. We have to expect that things are going to be different for quite some time.
I think that's the reality. I think setting in for a lot of people right now is that it's going to be a while for the vaccine, and until that happens, life is going to be a lot different. What's being done to help support businesses in Holyoke? We're going to discuss that once we return. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about the city of Holyoke's response to the COVID-19 health crisis. Many businesses are struggling financially and in turn will affect the economic health of the city. So joining us now is the mayor of Holyoke. Thanks for coming on the program once again here. What is the newly created COVID-19 Holyoke Business Emergency Operations Grant Program? Long name right there. What is that?
Yeah. Well, originally, a few weeks ago, we launched 3 different buckets of response to this pandemic locally. Number 1, housing and sheltering issues, social services, making sure people and residents have access to food and basic amenities. And then number 3, the local economy and local businesses. And so we, about 4 weeks ago, launched a weekly call with our Chamber of Commerce and small businesses. What are your needs and challenges, and what can we do to help you get through this? I will say from the onset, this is an incredibly difficult time for our small businesses and businesses in general throughout the city and throughout our country, throughout Western Mass. And many business owners are wondering if they're going to make it through. And unfortunately, we saw today that the Paycheck Protection Program, the small business grants and loans in the federal stimulus package is already dry. And thousands of businesses here in Massachusetts were unable to get through that bureaucratic process and access a single dollar of money. And so when you think about a federal package that spent billions of dollars to bail out some of our largest corporations, but left small business owners in places like Springfield and Holyoke and in other cities in Hampden County, I think that's just unacceptable. And so we need to make sure that the next state and federal response includes more money for small businesses here in our community. But what we've done in the absence of that is use already existing community development block grant funds to establish a grant program where businesses can put in an application, not for a loan, but for a grant. We heard loud and clear, our small business owners, they don't need more debt. That is something that is no cause or fault of their own to put them further in debt when they need the money now to pay their bills, to pay their staff and employees. And so this is a grant directly to business owners. We have information on our website. We're doing this in partnership with our Chamber of Commerce. And we are receiving additional money in community development block grant funds that we want to make sure goes to small businesses as well.
Do you have any idea of how many service and low-wage workers who live in Holyoke have lost their jobs based on, what you know from your local census information, I guess?
I don't have an exact number based on census information. I will say over the last several years, our unemployment rate has gone from upwards of 13% to under 5%. And so like the rest of the country, we're going to see that number go back up. Nearly 17 million Americans in the last 4 weeks have lost their job. And unfortunately, we have a healthcare system that ties health insurance to employment, which I also think is something that needs to be revisited, particularly right now at this moment in history. But this is particularly hurting people in places like Holyoke and Springfield, communities with people that are already more likely to be food insecure and housing insecure. And we need to do everything we can to make sure that we have a bailout at the federal level that focuses on people and workers and the most vulnerable members of our community to make sure people can get back on their feet. The average American doesn't even have $400 in savings for an emergency. And so a one-time payment of $1,200 just isn't going to cut it for the people here in Holyoke and the vast majority of people across our state.
And some people aren't getting that $1,200 right away. They need it right now, and they still haven't received it. What are your biggest concerns for unemployed residents right now?
Yeah, there's a number of concerns. So, April 1st came and went, and I convened we have regular conversations with our local landlords. We want to get a sense, are people able to afford rent and utilities? We put a moratorium on evictions and all public housing in the city, and we encourage our private landlords to do the same. If folks don't have a job, we need to make sure that they get access to the state unemployment benefits as soon as possible. I do think, again, the federal stimulus needs to focus on a people's bailout, not a corporate bailout. And again, a $1,200 check just isn't going to cut it. People need to be in positions to support themselves, stay in their housing, stay in their apartment, continue to own their home, not go bankrupt, get health care, make sure they have food on the table and a place to sleep at night. And I worry that in a community like Holyoke, this is going to create a lasting impact for months and years to come if we don't get the proper relief that we need from the federal government right now.
How are the city's budget and the public services going to be impacted by this crisis? Because you mentioned kind of diverting funds for grants and stuff.
Yeah, this is going to be really difficult for a lot of cities and towns, just like it's impacting small businesses big and large, state government as well. And we're still trying to get an order of magnitude as to what the impact will be. We have a number of local revenue sources, from obviously property taxes to local meals and hotels taxes, excise taxes. And so we need to do a full-on analysis of those revenues and projections that we put into our budget to get a sense of how is it hurting our budget this year and how will it hurt us in the budget year that will start on July 1st of this year. And so there was one set of assumptions pre this pandemic, and all of those assumptions need to be thrown out the window about are we going to need to shrink government to some extent here locally. The last thing we want to do is cut city services to people that need it most. And I urge the governor, obviously urge the federal administration from the president on down to prioritize direct aid to local cities and towns, but aid that is based on the lost revenue to maintain city services, from public education to police to fire to the Department of Public Works. We need to make sure that we continue to provide these services to people, and we'll have a better sense in the coming weeks as to if we're going to be able to overcome this or not when it comes to maintaining those services.
Do you feel like your pleas for help from the state are being heard in Boston?
To some extent. I mean, this is a difficult situation in every 351 of the cities and towns across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You know, on a mayor's call yesterday, and you know, the state is losing revenue as well. When you think about income tax reductions, when you think about less money going into the lottery, which is then in turn typically given to local aid to cities and towns for transportation and education. And so every city and town is going to be impacted. The state's impacted. I know the state has a rainy day fund, as does the city of Holyoke. And so we're going to have to look closely at what are the programs coming out from the state and federal government to plug those holes. And if they're not there, how can we be resourceful on the local level and to provide the best possible service to people here?
All right, Mayor Alex Morse, we're going to have the last word after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. News in Focus here, and today we've been talking about what the city of Holyoke is doing to provide support to their medical community, residents, businesses too, during the COVID-19 crisis. And that is our program. I want to thank Holyoke's Mayor Alex Morse for coming on the program today. Thanks for coming on, and be well.
Thank you, Don. And yeah, everyone stay safe and healthy and enjoy your Sunday.
All right, good luck, and thanks at home for watching as well. If you've missed this program, you can watch it, of course, on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here, have a good day.